Hello, one and all, and welcome to the SuperShow podcast, episode number 215. No, that is not the time you say when you misremember or misquote your favorite joke about going to the dentist. It is, in fact, how far along the road we are on this gargantuan podcasting journey, littered with video games. And I don't know if I'd have made it an episode past episode 2 if it weren't for the accompaniment of my good friend Mr. Alex Jones. How are you, sir?
I am very well, thank you. I'm just trying to figure out the joke about the dentist thing. Were you referencing the 2:30 joke?
I was saying yeah, like if someone fucked up telling the 2:30 joke, they might say the 2:15 joke. And that's just the episode that we're on. That was because before we started recording, I asked you what number we're on, and you said 2:15, and the first thing that popped into my head was, that's like 2:30, but wrong.
But wrong, I see, yeah. And not as good as 4:20. And I can't think of any other number jokes. So there we go.
I mean, you could get the odd 69 in there if you wanted to,
of
but we're
course,
above that
of course.
because this is a mature gaming podcast for mature gaming audiences. That's right. Minors need not apply. Neither myself nor Mr. Jones are looking to sort of get ourselves Dr. Disrespected anytime soon. More on that later because I guess it's a moment to formally acknowledge that this is the first podcast we've done in a couple of weeks. Apologies to anyone who missed our regularly scheduled programming last week, but sometimes life does indeed get in the way. Would you believe it was the one who is not married, who doesn't have a mortgage, and who doesn't have kids who was responsible for us missing an episode? The person who just has to sit around drinking energy drinks and playing video games was the one who threw us off the track. So apologies to you, Jonesy, for that. And apologies to anyone who missed us last week.
I don't forgive you. You have to make it up to me by playing video games with me on stream.
That's a big ask. Knowing our track record, that is a promise I might never actually be able to fulfill. I can try, though, in the meantime, and make up the shortfall by, if not playing video games with you, then at least talking about video games with you, which is exactly what we do on this piece of fine programming you're listening to or watching right now. Because if you're with us on YouTube, then that means you're seeing our faces. You could be watching the VOD after the fact, or you could be with us live. Jonesy, as always, is going to have a hawk eye on the chat, and I'm sure we'll be giving some shout-outs to anyone who's lurking there, so say hi if you are watching along with us live. But of course, you could be listening on podcasting platforms. For anyone interested in checking us out on any of those, Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, those are the places to be. And of course, you can always catch up with us if you miss it. You can't miss a pre-recorded piece of content that exists on just about every digital platform imaginable. But if you wanted to feel like you missed it, like this is like the 90s and you miss an episode of Twin Peaks and you can't bring yourself to go within 6 feet of the water cooler for fear of a spoiler, then the place to go is paisleyradio.com. This podcast is beamed out on Thursdays at 10 p.m. It's repeated on Mondays. Jonesy, before we get into any video game nonsense, because who cares about games, how the hell are you? I feel like I've barely spoken to you for 2 weeks, let alone our audience hearing from you.
I'm good, thanks. Yeah, it's been a busy time, but it's been good. I'm glad that we managed to finally get some time to sit down and chat. I have some outside of gaming news that I could pass over. Actually, and I'll push it out to our audience as well, because I know I imagine, I don't know why, I feel like someone in our audience or a couple of people may have knowledge of this, so they can help me out. So since we last spoke and did the podcast, I passed my motorbike test.
Woo-hoo!
So I can now drive any motorbike I want to. So midlife crisis, fully engaged, ready to take the next step. But I don't know what to get. This is the thing. I've been looking and I've been wondering, and I thought maybe some of our audience would be able to weigh in the comments and give me a suggestion. So if you've got a particular bike, particular brand, or something you think might be good for me, let me know. Drop it in the comments.
Absolutely. I was about to try and solicit them for their opinions, but I realised I didn't know what the collective term for them was. I was going to call them bike heads. How does that sit with
bike
you?
Heads? Yeah, maybe bike heads. I suppose bikers is like the typical go-to.
Bikers.
But then maybe that's now been co-opted by people who ride pedal bikes. I don't know.
Oh, no, when you say bikers, I'm still like, Hell's Angels is still the first visual that appears in my head. It's leather jackets and heroin overdoses. That's still well and truly the realm of bikers, at least as far as I'm concerned.
I always think of the time that someone, I can't remember who it was, a singer asked the Hells Angels to be security Oh, maybe it's a band at their gig, and then they
Right.
killed like 3 people as security. So yeah, don't do that. It's not a good look.
Uh, well, as Max Payne famously said in Max Payne 3, you get what you pay for. And you, if you're listening to this or watching this, paid for absolutely nothing, which means you're going to get a low quality podcast. You're welcome. And I'll be honest, Jonesy, we actually kind of maybe picked a good time to take a week off because we are inevitably entering into that what would traditionally have been called the post E3 lull. We're waiting for John Madden to reopen the floodgates. That hasn't quite happened yet. But of course, things are going to be hotting up throughout the later months of the year, and some of the biggest releases of the year are going to be arriving starting in August. What that inevitably means, though, is that absolutely none of the biggest releases of the year are coming out in July. But that doesn't mean we won't sit here and tell you what you should be keeping an eye out for in a segment of the podcast that was, of course, created and suggested by OG member of the Super Show community, Pastors Guild, and immortalized by Jonesy's insistency that we continue to do it. Would you like to know what we've got to look forward to in the month of July, in the year of our Lord 2024?
I would love to. It's one of my favourite segments on the pod. It's where I get to remember there's all these games coming out that I would not have remembered. So there we go.
There you go. I feel like that makes me feel a little bit better about us and the public service that we may or may not be doing by letting people know that, for example, in the past, because it is at the time of recording the 3rd of July, a couple of this month's heavy hitters have already released. Fans of the MMO Final Fantasy XIV can now look forward to the official release of the Dawn Trail expansion, I guess, for want of a better way of putting it. I know that thing that had a few quirks when it was in early access. Hopefully, most of those have been figured out, though, because I know that the continued updates that Final Fantasy XIV has seen over the years have often been met with widespread acclaim. A game that I have been playing a little bit of, Jonesy, and we'll talk about in some more detail later. The First Descendant also came out or launched yesterday. A game that the easiest and the best shorthand way to remind anyone about what the First Descendant is it's one of those games that appeared at Jeff Keighley's show in what was very obviously a paid-for slot, didn't look real, and yet the trailer ended and was like, this game is out in 3 weeks. And you're like, huh? Why did you just show me an entirely CG trailer that you paid $250,000 for? Show me the video game. We'll talk about it. Speaking of games that only ever appear at Keighley shows and you don't actually know what they are or if they're real, Zenless Zone Zero comes out on the 4th of July. But that is, of course, another game from the kind of the Hoyo, whatever it's called. All the Genshin Impact, Honkai Star Rail stuff, which means that even if you haven't heard of Zenless Zone Zero at the moment, it will probably be the second or third biggest game of all time, I'm going to say, by the end of the
probably. Year. And you still wouldn't have heard of it even when it is the second or third biggest game of all time. You'd still be like, what? What game? But
Zenless Zone, how many Zs is it? That's coming out tomorrow at the time of recording. On the 9th of July, you can look forward to Once Human, another game that actually we saw a good chunk of and were surprised by the release date for during one of Keighley's shows during the summer. And then a game that I think actually popped up at Devolver's show, the latest Free Lives joint, Angerfoot, finally comes out on the 11th of July. I actually played a demo for that, I think, maybe about a year ago.
Okay.
And for a game that is largely about for anyone that hasn't seen it, it's a very over the top, oversaturated first person shooter. Which, but as the name would suggest, one of the key mechanics is basically just a giant front kick that you can just do at any time to kick down doors or smash
people.
Don't
you change the type of foot you get as well, so you can kick in different ways and do different things with different feet.
That sounds absolutely like the kind of thing they're going for. I can't even remember. It's just they describe it as a lightning fast FPS where the only things harder than your ass kicking feet are the ass kicking beats.
Okay. Angerfoot does look quite cool, actually. It's what's funny. I read this list and I was like, oh, Angerfoot. That's like one of the only ones I'm kind of thinking about. So there we go.
Yeah, it was always nice to see a Devolver joint come around as well. Hopefully that delivers on our lofty expectations. One thing that I know a lot of fans are going to be looking forward to, especially fans of its predecessor, Darkest Dungeon 2, finally comes out on the 15th of July. We get Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Splintered Fate for the Switch on the 17th of July. Quick note here, that is not the arcade brawler that we saw during the summer. That is, in fact, the iOS and iOS title that was you're already out there, I think, on Apple Arcade that is now just coming over to Switch. Dungeons of Hinterberg, for anyone that remembers Xbox's showcase last year, they might remember seeing this game. Really a quite attractive art style. Finally comes out on the 18th of July. Another game that has been a mainstay at Xbox showcases in recent years, Flintlock, The Siege of Dawn, comes out on the 18th of July. Although it's worth noting that one is cross-platform. But I think it's also a Game Pass joint, so maybe anyone with Game Pass for PC or Xbox, keep an eye out for Flintlock. That looks like it's going to be quite a fun sort of. I mean, I played the demo and I talked about it. I think it was a couple of weeks ago, and I think God of War was weirdly one of the closest analogs I could come up with for it. So anyone who likes the sound of that, keep your ear to the ground. Capcom coming out with Kunitsugami Path of the Goddess on the 19th of July. This is the game that I always remember from its announcement, because in the brief time between the Capcom logo appearing and the gameplay of Kunitsugami becoming apparent, I thought this was the return of Onimusha. Turns out it wasn't. No Jean Reno for us, Jonesy. We're going to have to wait. But you don't have to wait too much longer if you are looking forward to what Kunitsugami Path of the Goddess actually is. Like I said, 19th of July. And then we pretty much round out the month with F1 Manager 2024 on the 23rd of July. At one point, I did have Frostpunk 2 on this list, but I believe that has gotten a last-minute delay until September. For anyone who wanted to do an RTS or like world-building thing, city-building thing, while also being really cold, you'll have to wait.
You will have to wait. Almost until winter, so maybe it's apt.
Maybe, do you know what? That's probably what they were going for. They were just they thought that there was a more appropriate season to launch Frostpunk 2 into.
Someone in the marketing team said, we can't launch this game in the summer, so they've pushed it to autumn instead.
Do you know what? I've heard games delayed for stupider reasons. So if you told me a marketing team did something weird, I would believe you. This is, after all, the realm of video games where anything can happen, and often does. Speaking of which, Jonesy, we don't have any kind of massive news stories to sink our teeth into this week. We've kind of got a collection, a taster, like a little 9-course meal where every plate that gets brought out is just kind of designed to be eaten at one bite.
Yes. Is that nouveau cuisine? Is it that?
Yeah, we're the nouveau cuisine of gaming podcasts, but with less foam.
Oh yeah, we don't need a foam or a gel. We're good without foams and gels. Can I just talk about some aperitifs though before we get into?
I genuinely thought you said a pair of teeth, and I was like, "What the fuck?" Yes, please do.
But before we get into our nouveau cuisine main course, because I just want to give a quick shout out to some people that have joined us in the chat live on YouTube. We have got Magni, Rodrigo, Jim Johnston, and the Just Interesting podcast boys joining us in the chat. Thank you so much for watching along with us. Also, just have to say as well, Jim Johnston suggests that when it comes to motorbikes, I should pick up a bike with a sidecar for the wife. So there we go.
It's a great idea. I'm slightly disappointed they didn't say a sidecar for me. We are podcasting peas in a pod. I don't know why.
I would love that. I would love to have you in a sidecar with little driving goggles, and then we pull up, and then you take them off and have them on your head. That'd be funny.
Hang on, you're just doing like a wacky racers kind of thing. Like this is your Dastardly and Muttley headcanon, except I'm Muttley.
You're Muttley, of course you are.
Yeah.
There we go.
And then you'd have to insert some like over dramatic Looney Tunes-esque joke about me being so heavy that the sidecar is dragging along the concrete the whole time, or that the second I sit down, the other side, the bike side, gets hoisted off the ground so that you're actually 6 foot up, and the wheels are no longer making contact with the ground, and you can't drive because I'm fat. What do you think?
Yeah, that we'd have to play that joke at least a few times. Of course, come on.
I think it's got legs.
We might get cancelled for it after. Oh no, I suppose I'd get cancelled for it. You'd be okay, but there we go.
Yeah, that's what I say every time I make a fat joke. It's like I'm allowed. Like I've got. It's like it's the fat version of having the pass.
But I'm fat too, so don't I get a pass too though?
Jonesy, I'm not going to ask you to stand up and do a 12 for the people watching the video version of this podcast, but the world needs to know that you are not in any way, shape, or form overweight.
Unfortunately. The doctors would not agree, but I'm not quite sure what Magni means. But in chat, Magni said it's extremely old school cooking. The original menu key was 16 courses, so I'm guessing that you mean back in the day they used to have. I don't know what original menu key is. but they used to have 16 courses, which sounds interesting. I think I could get down with a meal that was 16 courses, where they bought you out a little nibble for each one.
Yeah.
That sounds pretty good.
And you know what? It's probably still extremely filling because there's that thing, isn't there, called the Centurion, which is where you take one sip of
100
beer.
points.
Yeah.
No,
Well,
100
not
shots
100
of
pints.
beer.
Yeah, 100 shots of beer,
Yeah.
not 100 pints. 100
Not 100
pints of beer might kill you. I don't know. Depends. But yeah, and it sounds incredibly easy. And like anyone who hasn't done it before goes, well, 100 shots of beer. And I forget what the time interval was, but it's very basic. It's like, I can't remember if it's 30 seconds or a minute, but the way that your body sort of deals with things that come in that are measured out in a certain way is slightly different. You also have experience of that because we once did a race, you and I, and a third member who I shan't name, to see who could eat the most chicken nuggets in the fastest amount of time. And you stormed out of the gates, but that was actually a very successful tactic. And it was almost like when you let it mellow, that's when your body was like, you should probably stop eating nuggets.
Yeah, and then it wasn't good, and then you felt pretty rough. Yeah, nuggets. Too many nuggets.
Yeah, turns out they start to taste like cardboard. There is such a thing as too many nuggets. Jonesy, let me tell you, if their 1980 smash hit is anything to go by, the Vapors aren't the only people turning Japanese anymore, because the games industry is slowly turning more and more Japanese, just because apparently Japanese studios are the only people who aren't laying off their staff en masse. And while we continue to turn to Japan to deliver us hot, sexy video games, we turn our attention on this podcast to Capcom Next for summer 2024. It turns out Capcom had a stream the other night to kind of let the world know what they've got coming in the future. If you didn't see or hear any headlines that come from the stream, it's because there basically weren't any. But I'm going to say this, Josie. If this stream had taken place in like the key 3 week, like Capcom would have been, well,
Slammed.
Like absolutely slammed. I think there's a reason that they took all their kind of Monster Hunter stuff out of this and let that stand on its own, because it would have been dragged down with how underwhelming this showcase was. But one thing we did get a cool extended look at was the upcoming remaster/remake of Dead Rising, curiously named Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster, aka DRDR. That's what I hope we start calling it.
Doctor.
Yeah, careful. We got another story coming up on that might make you rethink your naming decisions with that one. But this is, let's use their language for now, a remaster of the original zombie killer shooter Dead Rising that came out on the 360 back in the day. Now for the PS5 and the Xbox Series X and S. We originally got a kind of a short teaser trailer showing off some new visuals and a redesigned Frank West. We've since had a more expanded look at the game and kind of how they're staying true to some of their core principles from 2006, and how they are like modernizing certain other elements. But I'll be honest, they were talking a lot, Jonesy. I was still thinking about one thing, and that was Frank West's head. Am I right in thinking you were a PS3 guy? So 2006, Dead Rising was one of the games you had to look at from a safe distance.
Dead Rising was one of the games that genuinely made me contemplate my decisions about not getting an Xbox. It was right. I think it was because it was at the time when any sort of game, a zombie game, it was much more of the like constrained. You're going to have to take like a couple of zombies on at a time, and even then I was all about like I want to take on hordes of zombies, and Dead Rising always looked like the most fun you could possibly have when it came to that, because you just get to be ridiculous, get to be stupid, make those insane weapons, and fighting zombies in a mall like ad nauseum, but also having just hundreds of them. I was so jealous of people playing Xbox that got to play that, and I didn't.
Yeah, well, I mean, you had other smash hits to keep you busy other than the PS3. You could have spent any time that you weren't playing Dead Rising, for example, playing Lair with some of the most advanced motion controls that Dragon Flight mechanics have ever seen.
I nearly hired it from Blockbuster multiple times, Lair, and then never did.
You were missing out. Well, I guess one thing then that I must ask kind of off the bat, as someone who watched, like I said, looked on at Dead Rising from a distance with a certain amount of jealousy, it sounds like. How excited for this are you?
Less so because you could play Dead Rising on the PlayStation
This is the thing.
4, was it? Or 3? I can't
Yeah,
remember whenever it did
a
come.
lot of these games got remastered. Yeah, it was like
Number of years
inside the
ago.
last like 6, 7 years. Like not too long ago.
So I've actually played a decent amount of Dead Rising, and do you know what? That remaster I played I thought was actually was good, was fine. I enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun with it. Which is why I'm a little bit like, remaster. Are they remastering it again, or is this one of those
Right.
remake remasters? Like, how far are we going down that route? As we said, some of the images of Frank and his head look a bit interesting. So they've obviously done something there. Maybe I should just flag that I did fuck with it in the thumbnail. That's not actually as big as his
Yes.
head looks, but that was for fun.
I kind of wish it was though. Like I hope they see that thumbnail and introduce like a big forehead toggle.
Like the reverse to when everyone complained about Sonic's teeth and then they got rid of them or they changed them. They actually go like, do you know what? You complain about his head, and they just make it even bigger.
Yeah,
And then add in
exactly.
silly hats in the game, loads more silly hats, so that he just looks silly wearing crazy hats as well. I'll be there for that.
Absolutely. I think embrace it. Embrace the fun of Dead Rising. Absolutely, by making Frank's forehead massive.
But no, I am a Dead Rising fan, and I would like to play more Dead Rising. If this is a remaster meets remake kind of thing, which is still pretty faithful to the original, and there's a lot of fun to be had. I think that game kind of holds up, if the visuals do. So yeah, why not? I'd jump in again.
I think I would too, just out of principle. But one thing I always wonder with something like Dead Rising is that I don't disagree with you when you say that it holds up. Like, if anything, how different, especially the first Dead Rising game, was compared to everything else that was coming out at the time, and a lot of things that have come out since. Um, make it stand out and make it worth sort of restoring in as faithful a way as possible. And I know some people were really disappointed with the directions that 3 and especially 4 kind of went in, and how they like watered down some of those core principles of the Dead Rising formula. But I might have to say this quietly. There were some of them that I never really loved.
Right.
And whilst they've acknowledged that they're going to improve on certain things, like I think they've acknowledged that, like, hey, having to go back to a restroom or whatever it was to save every single time, and not having kind of any sort of auto save was maybe a little bit punitive, for example. But I'd imagine, based on what we saw in that kind of slightly more extended look at Capcom Next, there's still going to be the overall time constraints. That just feels like fundamental to the Dead Rising experience. You're still going to be looking at Frank's watch like every 10 minutes to see like missions coming and going in real time. And I know it was a game that was designed to be replayed, but I always had that stress of like, there's a main story mission that I need to go and start inside the next like 10 minutes. Otherwise, it will expire. And then I can stay in the mall for the rest of the time, but like no new missions will actually populate. And I would do runs where I would intentionally fail the main missions just so I could spend time in the mall and kill zombies. But I don't know. I always found that balance weird. How much of that uh, affected your experience when you went back to those remasters?
It did a bit, like, because it did feel dated, but I think the core gameplay mechanic and what you're doing is strong enough that it's fun. But like I said, when you sort of, the idea of having a remaster of this, it just makes me go like, oh yeah, that sounds cool, fine. It doesn't get me that excited because it's going to be mired by those things that we've kind of moved past. When it comes to video games, which is why I think it's a bit of a shame that they're not just doing like a complete remake. Or do you know what? Why? Or they're just making a new one.
Well, there's that too, yeah.
Because I think that would lend itself much better to like a new audience, or to an audience who want to come back to it. And they've also, when you think of Capcom, they've had some really strong remakes with obviously like Resi 1, Resi 2. So there's a scope there to do that. I don't know. I always feel like there is space out there for a sandbox zombie horde killing game that's just fun and just kind of silly, but it doesn't make me want to sit down and plug hours into it. It just makes me maybe want to get it and just dip into it every now and then.
Right.
So,
yeah.
But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. There's so many things of that game which are like frustrating as well.
But I guess that they are also what make Dead Rising. And
Yeah.
like, I feel like I feel like the dunce in the corner when I admit that like Dead Rising 3 and 4 were like, I almost preferred them to 1 and 2, but it was almost because Dead Rising 3 and 4 were like streamlined the system so much that they just embrace their lives as these 7 out of 10 go into a shop, pick an inanimate object off the wall and kill zombies with it in fun and unique ways. Like, and that, in a weird way, that was all I ever wanted from like the first Dead Rising. I thought like the psychopaths, for example, and the variety of them and their presentation and their backstories were cool. And the idea of having to go and like find survivors and have them follow you through them. But like, it was just, you know what it was, Josie? It was a lot of it was too stressful. A lot of it was too stressful, and I don't vibe well with stress in my games.
I'm kind of with you. I'd tell you now as well. I cannot for the life of me remember the Dead Rising remaster that I played. Like I genuinely can't. I don't even know. It's that I've always, so I couldn't even tell you how. I thought it was the first one, but I don't know if it is. It's like there's an element of stress to those games, and there's an element of like the time stuff, and like you said, the leading people around stuff is stressful. But then when you get down to it, all I want to do is smush zombies with golf buggies and your golf clubs and bats and whatever. I almost want them to just go harder on that, maybe, and take away some of that other stressful stuff that you've mentioned, and just give me a platform where I can just be even more stupid and even more over the top on zombie smushing.
Did you ever play Dead Rising 4?
I don't know. I can't even remember. What was Dead Rising 4 on? Was that PlayStation?
So Dead Rising 4 was an Xbox One exclusive at the time, but it has since come to just about everything under the name of like Dead Rising 4 Frank's something or other. It was confusingly the game where Frank's West
Big Package.
There you go, Frank's Big Package, because Frank West returned as the protagonist, albeit a markedly different style of Frank, given sort of how he was written relative to the first one. And it was set during Christmas time. That was kind of the gimmick.
Right.
I thought Dead Rising 4 was like silly, but like it was fun in the ways that I'd wanted some of the other ones to be. Not that they were ever self-serious, but yeah.
I will attempt. I don't know if I can. I was going to see if I could attempt to log into my PlayStation thing and see what Dead Rising I own. I don't know if I can do that though.
Yeah, because I would ask you like which protagonist you played as, but even that doesn't narrow it down. Because but like even Frank, there's Dead Rising 2 Off the Record, I believe it's called, which is you playing it. It was originally DLC, but you can buy it like standalone now, which is you playing as Frank in the mall from Dead Rising 2. All very confusing, but needless to say, we will get our zombie smushing action one way or another when DRDR releases later on in the year, and it will look better than ever. I don't know if you caught any of these trailers, Josie, to see the job they've done with the visuals. I will say, we had this a little bit a couple of weeks ago with our discussions around Metroid Prime, and my assertion that like even though they themselves called it a remaster, I didn't think it was one. This is the same thing.
Right.
I actually think I think that being humble, the humility of publishers like Capcom and Nintendo in how they are naming their own remakes is damaging how clean the lines are between the words remaster and remake, and it's kind of getting under my skin in a way.
Okay, that's fair enough. I think that I suppose as we said before, like when we talked about it before, I guess the reason they do it is because to say remake, maybe that suggests a 100% replacement of everything within the game, and you're making it from the ground up, which is mad.
Like that's what this is.
But then maybe the problem is that there's 20%, 10% reuse of assets, and so they're like, do you know what? For the fact of not getting people complaining that there's reuse of stuff, that we just say remaster. But then that doesn't make any sense, because then you're underselling something that you've got. And like someone like me might say, oh well, I've already played the remaster, why would I play another remaster of a game that I've already played? Maybe we need another term.
Maybe there needs to be an in-between term, and you're going to coin it right this second, because that's what podcasting on the spot is all about.
Remash.
A remash. Actually, you know what? Kind of like when you did like the switcheroo for the Nintendo Switch 2, I kind of don't mind it. Sometimes these things happen in the moment. Quiz question: if both you and I took a hiatus from this podcast to go and get plastic surgery and like facelifts and Botox and all that stuff, and then came back, would this podcast have been remastered or remade?
Remashed.
Remashed. Okay. I'm actually tempted to put that as a stretch goal on the Patreon. If anyone wants to see what the Super Show remastered looks like, we just need to raise enough money for Jonesy and I to fly out to Turkey to get new hair and new teeth. And then
That's interesting. What level of plastic surgery is a remaster? What level is a remake? I think remake is going under the knife. And I think you're right. A remaster is maybe getting like hair plugs, getting teeth like veneered on your teeth. Yeah. I could get some laser eye surgery. There we go. Then I wouldn't have to wear glasses.
LASIK. Yeah, I saw a big debate about LASIK on Twitter the other day, where someone was saying, "Best decision I ever made in my life. I should have done it 20 years sooner." And someone else in all caps was like, "It will make you blind. It made me blind, and it will make you blind too." Which I feel like just sums up every argument ever on Twitter.
How did they read it?
Only polar extremes. Maybe it's Elon's working on a brand new feature called Twitter Braille that makes bumps physically appear on the surface of your phone. Don't ask him how. He's a genius.
Here's a genuine question. I've often wondered this about people that are not people that have got like visually challenged, because like obviously you can see something. But if you're completely blind, how do you find the Braille? I've often seen Braille in the wild, and I think like it's often in places where it's the words are there, it's below the words. I'm like, how do they find the words?
Good question.
How do they find the Braille? Unless there's a
maybe
standard,
you just feel around.
But see, that would be meant, and they can't just walk around feeling everything. That's some stuff.
Yeah, but
but
they're rarely on their own. They usually have a person with them who can say like, "Hey, there's some Braille there." Not the dogs; they can't talk.
Because the dogs aren't going to tell you where the Braille is. I'm genuine. I'm going to have to. There are some blind TikTokers and YouTubers out there who answer questions. I might have to drop them a question and be like, "How do you find the Braille?" For me, do you know what it is? For me, it's on the train toilet. They always they have it, and then I'm like, "How did they find the toilet?"
Right. Yeah. Because if you walk around with both hands out in front of your face, trying to feel for Braille wherever Braille might be, eventually you're going to fall afoul of someone's face or breasts, or maybe worse.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Is it an interesting? I don't know. I'm going to say something. I asked it, so maybe I'm going to say it's an interesting question. Maybe it's not. We'll find someone. I'll get an answer. I'll find a person that we can ask online and see what they.
Yeah, but then again, if you ask them, you'd be writing it, and how are they going to? I guess they could text to speech.
Yeah, they're creators. They've got ways. They've got ways and means.
Accessibility. It's big right now.
It is very big.
There was, hey, another piece of Twitter discourse that we're not going to wade into. That I saw popping off this past week about accessibility and whether having a child is a disability.
I saw that. No, it's not.
Yeah. No, but I think it was.
I've got one.
I know.
She called it. What was it like?
Situational disability or something like that.
Situational disability. But the thing is, like, you can't. I think that is the most ludicrous thing I've heard. I've got kids. I've been exactly the situation. I know what you said. We're not going to wade into it, and now I'm wading into it. I'm getting my feet.
Yeah, that's fine.
Let's get my feet wet.
Yeah.
So I've been in this exact situation, and I know exactly the type of game she's talking about. I've played games like Overwatch, where you're playing online, or I've played like Helldivers, whatever, and suddenly the kids are there. And you can't pause it because you're in a live game, it's a live service thing, and you deal with it. The fact that this is the thing, you knew what you were doing when you started doing it, and issues that might arise. That is no different to me than anyone else in any household in the land who might suddenly have an issue they have to deal with. You can't then say any situation. Like, I've got a dog, so now it's a situational disability to have a dog in games. I've got a kitchen, and I left the oven on, so now I've got a situational disability to have a kitchen. I think I get what she's saying about having a kid affects your gaming, but to call it situational disability is kind of ludicrous.
I think that's a piece of language that maybe is used internally in certain studios that probably was never meant to be heard externally.
Right.
Like,
she also chose to have the kid.
Oh yeah, I know. I'm not going to argue with you. Like, it's absolutely a choice, and dealing with a kid that you chose to have or chose to raise or whatever it is, like that's just something you have to do. That's a decision you made. It's a consequence of your actions. But at the same time, like the person that we're kind of indirectly referring to is Alana Pierce, right? Who's I think actually rather than her video blowing up, it was an excerpt of her video that another Twitter account cut out that then got blown up and quote tweeted and so on.
That's what I saw, yeah.
So important to note as well that we're talking about working from a place of no context. But if you told me that yeah, this is an individual who works in video games. If you told me that she had worked with or worked across accessibility in video games, and when it comes to the meetings that accessibility teams have at certain studios, they have a list of quote unquote what was the term again?
Situational disability.
Situational disabilities, and they had like to do a thing where like, okay, reasons for being able to pause, reasons against being able to pause, and on reasons for, there was a list of quote unquote situational disabilities, and someone wrote, oh, your kids might come into the room. Like, I would believe that that's how all this like metamorphosized, but I agree that like when we get down to the point of suggesting that having kids like in your vicinity while playing video games is a disability, yeah, that sounds silly in its
No,
own right.
I'm not letting them off. This is, I completely think that those things in meetings are valid, but to term it, because this is, to my mind, is then okay. So what are they doing in that meeting? They've got a list of disabilities that might stop you from pausing, and then they're like, well, hold on, what about things that people don't have permanently? And then someone wrote on the board.
Like,
I know in my mind it's a whiteboard, and they have a whiteboard squeaky pen.
Yeah,
and they're like,
yeah. Exactly.
What are situational I think someone in that room who had a disability might have put their hand up and gone, sorry, can we call these something different?
If we acknowledge that the person holding the marker had writing situational impairments would have made this whole thing never happen, then we also not acknowledging that this whole conversation is a bit silly.
Oh, it is, but it's fun to get this deep into silly conversations.
Oh yeah, that's what social media is all about, baby.
Let's just say I didn't realize Alana Pierce had a kid. The dad is a lucky dude. Let's just say that.
I don't think she does.
I thought she said she had a kid.
No, this is the whole problem. I think the tweet that's gone viral has completely like
I was surprised I was surprised she had a kid. I was thinking like,
I'm 99% sure that she is not a mother, and that she was adding like context and color to a conversation around the idea of situational disability, and a slightly grifty Twitter account was like, look at this mum who thinks having kids is a disability.
I read that, and then I saw the picture of Alana Pierce and was like, what? My brain was suddenly completely blown wide open, because I just suddenly thought of Alana Pierce sitting at home with two kids running around, thinking like, I never thought she was some mum, like some trad wife who plays video games. I know she's not, but my brain went, Alana Pierce is some trad wife in a summer dress with two kids running around while she's trying to play video games, and I was like, oh, weird. And then she then responded to that tweet saying something like, I think trying to correct the issue, but she was like, having children stop you from pausing games is absolutely a situational disability. And I was like, it is, but it's fun to kind of get into this, the silliness sure. of calling it that.
Although, Jonesy, I will say, now that you've challenged it, you have now lost your pass to claim that you are situationally disabled anytime that your kids interrupt your gaming in the future. If you and I are 1v1ing on Rust anytime soon, and one of your little ones runs in, I'm not gonna listen for a second about any situational disabilities.
I'm just not gonna call it that. What if I just? Oh God, the kids run in. It would be worse if I said, "Oh, I actually lost that game of Rust because I was situationally disabled." Like, you'd then go, sorry, what? And I'd be like, oh, see, it's not my fault that I lost that. It's actually a real issue that I've got. Like, that would be ludicrous. I think so. Do you know what it is? Do you know what that is? Life. Do you know what that is? Kids running in and disrupting your gaming is life. Get over it.
I mean, yeah, but then you kind of get into slightly murky waters, don't you? Where there's a lot of the things that people spend sometimes a little bit too much time complaining about online, that you could turn around and say, yeah, do you know what that is? That's life. And it would shut down a lot of those conversations a lot sooner than they do get shut down. But it would also remove a lot of the ammunition that people have to keep online arguments alive. And we thrive on them.
Oh, but they've also annoyed me as well, because they've missed the number one situationally disabling aspect of having children.
Oh, I thought you were going to say they've missed the number one situational disability, which is, of course, holding in a poo.
that is a very good one. No, the main issue is not that you can't pause a game which is like a game and you can't stop. The fact is that you can never get on the bloody PlayStation because the children are always on it. That is the real issue.
Of course. Yeah, the real situational disability is Roblox being installed on your PlayStation and you essentially losing any rights you have to playing it.
Exactly. And today was a new one because what is it? It's Lego Hobbit is now free, or it's been. I don't know how long it's been free for. It's free on the PlayStation Store. It wasn't before. It's now free. I found it the other day, and my son happened to walk in as it said free download for PlayStation members. And he went, "Oh, is Lego Hobbit free?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, it is." And he went, "Please download it. Please download it." So then today, as soon as they got home from school, they were like, "Can we play Hobbit, Lego Hobbit?" Ah! And then, all right, go on then. So then they spent an hour and a half playing Lego Hobbit game.
I think there are lots of very effective. What's the word I'm looking for? Contraceptives out there. But you regaling tales of your kids and the PlayStation is one of the most effective ones that I know of. So thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
One game that you'll definitely be pausing, whether you've got kids around you or not, because you'll need to stop yourself from getting spooked and scared because of how scary it's going to be, is a game that Capcom nonchalantly announced in the middle of that aforementioned Capcom Next showcase. And again, you'd be forgiven if you haven't seen any headlines really about this. It was a very bizarre way to announce that Resident Evil 9 is indeed a thing. Now, of course, it almost certainly won't be called that when it's finally released, but it is in the works, and we also know now that it's being directed by Resident Evil 7's Koshi Nakanishi. Again, Jonesy, to reiterate, a new mainline entry in the Resident Evil series is kind of perhaps the least surprising thing ever, maybe. We are now, I think, 3, if I'm not mistaken, years removed from 2021's Resident Evil Village. So I guess, we've had the Resident Evil 4 remake since then. It makes sense that chatter around the next mainline series would start up around now. How ready are you for a new original Resident Evil? And an even bigger question than that, what will Resident Evil 9 be called, considering the trend we've been on with Resident Evil 7, of course, being called, well, technically Biohazard, and them doing that. And then, of course, we had Resident Evil 8, which was Village, and then they took the V and the I and the L's and made basically, how are you going to squeeze your Roman numerals into this one, bad boy?
I was just trying to think. I've not played a Resident Evil mainline game since the one that we played, which
that was 7.
That was 7, so I have not played 8, and yeah, you might see in the thumb that I put in a cheeky little pic of Lady Dimitrescu from Village, because I thought I would. So when you said people will be pausing the game, I was thinking for different reasons. After everyone got a little bit mummy happy when it came to
for a hot jerkin.
Yeah, actually, let's join together a story and a non-story if you want something. No, because this sounds seedy now. I'm going to say it, but just check it out anyway because I was surprised. We were just talking about Alana Pierce. If you want to have a little Google, go and find her cosplay that she did of Lady Dimitrescu for a treat.
You just took us down like 3 pegs on the CD-ometer.
Oh, I just remember thinking like. She's just like you. She's a video game person. You see her playing stuff and chatting and she's cool. She's a commentator, and she did that cosplay, and I was like, she looks good. She looked very good as Lady Dimitrescu. Anyway,
Okay.
let's leave the seediness behind.
I wish I hadn't made the hot jerkin joke. Now, okay. Great.
Sorry,
those are 2 very separate statements. But although what you do with your jerkin time, that's completely up to you. How you jay it. That's I
apologize. Let's get back to 9. So Resident Evil 9, yeah, they're gonna have to call it something. And so I was trying to think what it was, and you were right. It was gonna be IX is 9 in Roman numerals. So it's gonna be something like Resident Evil X something.
Well, hang on.
I think
I thought that was your actual suggestion. It's
no.
But then that is that 1. That's not a word, and 2. That's just the Roman numerals. That's the worst idea you've ever come up with. On this podcast.
I'm trying to think. It's going to be IX something. So it's going to be X something, and I can't think of any words that start with start IX.
I don't think they have to start with it.
No, but I thought that might be a good one because X is quite a harsh sound. If it's just like ends in IX, I don't think it's as good. Maybe.
I've got a website up, thefreedictionary.com/words-containing-ix, ready to parachute in whenever you need some help.
What about?
This is like Scrabble, but played in the worst way possible.
Resident Evil
Yep.
existence. Like IX,
What? What?
like existence, but with IX instead of EX. Do you know why I thought of that? It's because existence, because there was a film came out when I was a kid with Jude Law called Existence.
Was that a
And it was like a sci-fi weird film.
Yeah.
It was quite good. It was all right. Weird.
I'll be honest,
right.
Jonesy. A throwback to an early noughties Jude Law sci-fi film or not? I'm not sure that that's necessarily what Capcom are looking for.
Resident Evil,
an intentional misspelling of the word existence.
I can't even say it. How would it be said? Resident Evil existence, something like that.
I think you right now, that like just a recording of you struggling the last 10 seconds would be the perfect case study as to why that would not be a good name.
Go on then.
Yeah.
Let me have it. What do you reckon it's
how many letter words? Let's go full Scrabble on this. How many letter words? Because I can go all the way up to
6.
Fourth. You want a 6-letter word? Okay.
Yeah.
I will just say there are tons of them.
These are ones that have IX in, but don't have to. They don't start with IX. They just have IX.
Yeah. So like, if we did a 6-letter word, we could, for example, have matrix, cervix, elixir, fixate.
Wasn't expecting cervix thrown in there.
Cervix, anyway. Yeah. I'm just throwing out something a little bit,
Fixate, okay.
Fixing and fixers, pixies, subfix, 60s, mixers, mix-ups, mixing, nixing.
Here we go. What about
pixels, vixens.
Let's go 9-letter words because it's Resident Evil 9. What about that? Are there any 9-letter ones?
There are loads. There are loads. We go, but I have just been reminded of one that might fit in with your Alana Pierce fantasies.
Go on.
I'm saying Alex Jones has just cast Alana Pierce in Resident Evil Dominatrix.
That's it.
And then you can see it now. The words appear: Resident Evil Dominatrix, and then flash, and just the IX on Dominatrix.
That's it. Dominatrix.
Linger.
I think you've got it. You've nailed it. How many letters are in Dominatrix?
10.
10. Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I think you've got it. Resident Evil 9 Dominatrix, and then people can do their whole Step On Me Mummy memes like they did with Lady Dimitrescu. So I think you nailed it.
Also popping up a lot that's also kind of horror adjacent is like crucifix and crucifixion and things like that. Like not crucifix, but crucifixions has an IX in it.
I think maybe
also
we should...
just loads of words I've never heard of before, like testatrixes. I just want to say these words. I don't know. Endomixes and fellatrixes. Stop me, Jonesy. Oh, yeah. Fellatrixes is derived from fellatio, so that's another.
Fellatrixes.
What the fuck?
Fellatrixes. Yeah. How do you?
I've got to Google that now.
Oh, you're gonna get some really weird porn.
I'm on my work computer as well.
Jamie's looking up.
A fellatrix is a woman who performs fellatio.
Oh, what?
Oh, you learn something new every day. That's in the Merriam-Webster.
I wonder if it'd be accurate.
Fellatrix. A woman who performs fellatio, a fellatrix.
I wonder if it'd be accurate to describe Alana Pitt. No, I'm joking. I'm not going to get that.
Now, Jonesy, now we've gone too far.
We have gone too far. That's why I stopped, because it was too far. I think maybe we should try and get Resident Evil 9 Dominatrix and try and say that, get people to believe that that's real. I don't know how we'd do that. We'd have to put it out into the ether and try and get people to share it. Go onto Reddit.
You can come up with a piece of AI art. I'm sure you're good at that.
And then we can get it out there and be like, new name for Resident Evil 9 game revealed.
Yep.
Yeah.
I can see it happening. And not enough people listen to this podcast that anyone will ever know it was us. We do have some quotes from director Nakanishi, and I thought they were kind of slightly interesting given the work that he's done before. Again, worth remembering that he was the director of Resident Evil 7, which is, of course, a big pivot for the series, especially following 6. It was the first one to take it into first person and kind of get back to its sort of slightly more hardcore horror roots. He said, "We're making a new Resident Evil," and then said, "It was really difficult to figure out what to do after 7. but I found it. And to be honest, it feels substantial. Of course, the elephant in the room there is whether it's substantial to Mr. Nakanishi or not. The Resident Evil team have already gone on and made another Resident Evil without him, so they know what to do after 7. It was 8, but he has just figured out what he wants to do after 7. It's 9, but
that's so funny in a way. He's gone like, I've just going to block this out of my brain so it doesn't exist. And everyone's like, you get that 8 came out. No.
It was like when Rocksteady were like, we don't care if it says the word Arkham on it. Like it's not in the series. It's like it doesn't count if it doesn't have his blessing. But it's still, I was going to say, it is interesting to see the guy who created the single biggest change and the single biggest pivot in the long history of a very successful survival horror franchise talk about things like not knowing what to do but figuring out and it being quote unquote substantial. Do you think that means we get another, maybe not as big a pivot change as going from third person to first person was, but another kind of like tonal shift or in setting, in like, it's hard to know what that could mean, right?
Yeah. It's also difficult with Resident Evil because, like you said, they've had so many shifts. So to see, but it's done brilliant things to them. I'd be kind of surprised if it was that much of a shift.
Me too.
Like I said, I didn't play 8, so it's hard to compare it to 7 and try and imagine how different like those two were. I played the demo for 8 and was like, nope, I'm not playing this.
8 was less scary, in spite of like there were some horrible bits in 8 in terms of like fear, but I found it overall less scary than 7.
Okay.
I couldn't play 7. I could play 8.
Yes,
So it also helped with 8
freaky.
is they officially added a third person mode, so you could play all of Village in third person by the end of it, and I found that helped me.
Yeah, no, I can imagine that would, because then it's just removing it from your viewpoint would do a lot. Well, I can't think what they would have that's gonna be that much of a departure.
You're in the room right now. The whiteboard is up at the front of the meeting room. The word situational disability has just been scrubbed off the whiteboard, and now they're looking for ideas on radical new ways or radical new directions to take Resident Evil 9 dominate, or Resident Evil dominatrix as we call it.
You become the evil.
Oh, I love it. So you're an undead, you're a zombie, you're an infected, you're something of that nature.
Yeah, and you end up going after people that are terrified of you and screaming around, and that would fit with the name Dominatrix. You're the one putting the pain on the pigs.
I love it. I love it. You are the one that is 9 foot tall and is standing on men who are enjoying it perhaps slightly more than they should.
They should not enjoy it because they're gonna get dead.
They go and get dead. Well, we will find out, I guess, in due course. I don't know how long this due course is, but it will be of some length. That is for sure, because that is the nature of time. But, Jonesy, before we get to a little bit of housekeeping, I will just quickly say that Capcom aren't the only people making potentially quite dramatic changes to what is a fan favorite and long-standing franchise. Sega have also been caught in the act. Albeit not a franchise that's had quite as many entries and has been quite as revered in recent times as Resident Evil has. Obviously, Sega hard at work at the moment on not just one, but half a dozen different sort of revivals of iconic franchises, from Golden Axe to Jet Set Radio and so on and so forth. But one that a lot of people, of course, have their eye on is Crazy Taxi, and we've finally gotten the first details about it. And it seems, based on things like a video interview that was given to a publication called Automaton, and also some job postings and some various other recruitment pages, it seems as though, brace yourself, Jonesy, the upcoming Crazy Taxi revival will be a large-scale multiplayer game set in a vast open world. Now, I don't know how you remember Crazy Taxi, but you probably don't remember it as a quasi-MMO. Am I right?
You'd be right. I actually played Crazy Taxi a couple of weeks ago, ironically. I was at the arcade, and they had Crazy Taxi there, so I had a little game. How does this become an MMO? I don't really understand how that would work.
Like, if you sort of like painted me the loose image of 100 crazy taxis all zooming around a city and like crashing in, then that actually sounds manic and fun. But when you start to ask me how I would integrate the kind of like the loop or the cycle of Crazy Taxi, especially given how arcadey it can be and like how you can fail and there's a constant timer and all that pressure, I don't know how you fit that into um like an online world or a multiplayer or large scale multiplayer setting, or how you make the other crazy taxiers around you relevant to your experience. And if
No.
you can't do that, then kind of what's the point?
What is the point? I can't even think what it would be. Like the only thing I can think is that they're going to somehow make it so that the game, you have to link up with other people to maybe do like, let's say you've got to deliver a whole bunch of people to where they need to be, and there's 10 people from a team, so you need 10 of your friends or 9 of your friends to get online with you and help take these people and drop them off where they need to be. But yeah, this doesn't sound fun. I can't really imagine how it works.
Yeah. One thing I will say that might shine a little bit of a light on this by admittedly turning that very same light off is that they might not know themselves exactly how this is going to function. Although they are currently planning for the new Crazy Taxi to be a massively multiplayer game, it seems as though, based on the suggestions the developers made on camera, that the team lacks programmers with the skills to build the infrastructure. And so development on this new Crazy Taxi game does seem to be in the very early days. And in fact, this interview kind of acted as a call for developers to join Sega and help make it as much as anything else. But if you follow up on that and look at the recruitment page for Crazy Taxi, there are several listings calling the game a quote large-scale online title. We know that it's been developed in Unreal Engine 4, and we know that one of its maps will feature a realistic city, shocker, and another will feature a theme park. But I suppose maybe they're asking the same questions that we are, but I'd be curious to know how much further they're getting in coming up with answers.
Do you know what it is for me? The only answer that I can think of is you get out the taxi.
I mean, that's not crazy. It's still Crazy Taxi at that point?
If the game loop is still that you need to get in the taxi to pick up someone and drop them off,
yeah,
and the driving's kind of crazy, then I could see how, for example, there's hub areas where you've got a lot of taxi drivers hanging around doing stuff. Maybe they've got like mini games involved in it, and you can upgrade your character and change your cab, and you've got like a garage and all stuff like this, and I could see how that could be MMOE. But when it comes to the actual loop of like the open world city and everyone, like as you said, is just tearing around in their cabs, like that to me sounds. But yeah, how do you involve any other players in that?
I think you'd have to split them up. Like, it's a very bad point of reference, and it's a very bad video game. But for some reason, I went down a rabbit hole the other day and was reminding myself what Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5 looked like. And that was another game that kind of, essentially the online elements of it, and this could easily apply to Crazy Taxi, kind of functioned as a social space, which is that like when you're not doing anything specific, you're going around a skate park and you're seeing other people, and maybe you can go up to them and maybe you can slap them, or maybe you can challenge them to a battle or a race or something like that, or maybe you can just emote and be near each other. But when it was time to collect 10 VHS tapes, like it kind of didn't matter that they were there.
Yep.
And like that's the only real thing I could see is that you're going around the city and like other people are going like driving all around you, kind of like that seamless integration that we've seen in the Forza games, and I don't even know, even Test Drive back in the day, where like cars are flying past you and people are emoting and beeping their customized horns, and my horn goes because I paid 69p for it, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I decided to play Crazy Taxi, and so I pull over and pick up a passenger, and then I've got 60 seconds to drop them off and collect money that I would spend to customize my taxi even further. And yeah, I don't know.
There would be something weirdly rewarding about the actual money the profit that you make in game. If you have to spend money on like filling up your taxi with fuel, and then you get money for delivering people, and you get more money for doing it well. Yeah, like let's say you tied that into it, so you have to offset how much it's costing you for petrol versus how much you're getting, and then you can actually do stuff with the money in the game. That would be kind of cool. Why did you
I
put a
agree
face at
about.
fuel?
I agree about doing like because it just seemed like of all the fun things to do with the money you're earning, like why would you have like an arbitrary like resource management
Oh,
tagged onto it? It's like you
if you
like
had a
some Days
mini
Gone fetishist out here.
if you had a mini game where it was like a gas station simulator where you had to get out, fill the car up, come on man, you'd love a little bit of
No,
that,
this is again. It's just reminding me of Days Gone of like me and whatever is called Deacon Saint Dickhead running around with like, a jerry can of fuel because I like stranded my bike in the middle of a forest
Oh, that was
next to
cool though.
3,000 zombies.
That was cool.
Yeah, but we're talking about Crazy Taxi. Like I was like, you picking up that person to do the next trip? No, my Crazy Taxi ran out of fuel.
Oh, but I was thinking of it in more.
I'm sitting there thinking I'm going to spend my money on pink fluffy dice to hang from the rear view mirror.
Oh no, but I was thinking in the sense of like if you do go back to this hub area and your car is like in a garage, that you can fill up your taxi there with fuel, and you can pick like the super high octane stuff that makes it go even more crazy. You can add like stuff to it, so you can like there's a whole element to it, but you've got to spend money. You've got to choose what to spend your money on. Like I think that could be a cool element to it.
Jonesy,
They should hire us.
I was going to say something to that effect, but it might sound like a backhanded compliment, but I mean it from the bottom of my heart. You were made to be a game designer, but exclusively in the world of free-to-play mobile games, because you understand depleting energy bars and making people refill shit arbitrarily like no one else.
I tell you, the part of the problem is because I've been playing so much of that stupid car mechanic simulator, where I'm like, I have to top the oil up and the engine, and I have to do all of that.
What if the Crazy Taxi reboot had realistic breakdowns and you had to get the spanner out and get under the and remove the terminology?
Now you're getting it, Jamie. Now you're getting it. Oh, I forgot my locking nut. What am I gonna do? I've got to run back to the garage and get my locking nut.
Yeah, I never forget my locking nut, if you know what I mean. Well, that's why we're not game designers, clearly. Instead, we do the next best thing, which is talk about video games on a podcast. But this feels like as good a time as any to mention that it is a video game podcast that would not be possible but without your support. That's because the Super Show podcast is entirely fueled. Get it? Crazy Taxi. Josie wants petrol or fuel in his Crazy Taxi. Hence why I said fueled by your support on Patreon. The place to go if you want to check out our page is patreon.com/Super Show. If you head over there, what you'll find is a whole bunch of tiers that you can pledge to and a whole bunch of rewards that you'll get in return for your pledge. Whether you're in the market for Patreon-exclusive podcasts, Patreon-exclusive videos, it's all there. You can check out all the rewards. And, of course, at the baseline level for just $2 a month, there is access to the Discord server where us and our wonderful community of hashtag gamers hang out and bitch and moan about the state of the industry. And if you want to join in that fun, you absolutely can. There are some names on screen right now of some fine folk who have already gone over there and done exactly that. And for that, we say thank you. But I would also like to give a personal shout out by saying the names of some individuals. That's Aaron Cameron, Athletic Gravy, Brimstone, Ice Not Rock Salt, Jesper Camdal Nielsen, Pastors Guild, Xander GTI. And then, of course, we have the big dogs, the members of the board, the head honchos, the guys refueling our wagons. Brett Z, a.k.a. Shell Shock, Geometric Potter, Hacksaw Book Read, Manuel Guerrero, and Peaswad. Lads, ladies, everything else, thank you all so much for your support, for your love, for your patronage. Makes it all possible.
It really does. No, thank you, everybody. And thank you to me for finally updating the OBS so that Jamie can do the announcement again for the Patreons, because for the last 2 times he's done it, I've messed it up. So there we go.
Thank you, Jonesy. Yeah, it's nice to have my voice heard as I'm. Well, that's why we're doing it. It's nice to be able to acknowledge the folks at home who make this whole thing work. Speaking of the folks at home, you've been a folk at home for the past 2 weeks. I presume, other than Lego Hobbit, you've been playing some form of video games, but you haven't let on if you have or not. So I throw it over to you in total uncertainty. Mr. Jones, do you have any games to tell us about?
Nothing that interesting. I've been playing some more Car Mechanic Simulator. I have also been hopping back into the world of Elden Ring because, of course,
nice.
with all of the the stuff around Shadow of the Erdtree, I felt like I was missing out a bit. And as I was telling you before the pod, I've managed to sort of get a little bit more of an affinity with that game and how it's sort of feeling and the loop. And so I've been enjoying it a bit more. So I'm going to try and stick with that for a bit. I have been watching more stuff. I would like to give a quick shout out to The Boys.
Which Netflix original with Jennifer Lopez in a starring role is it going to be this week?
It's not. This is 2 series. One coming in from Prime and one coming in from Disney. So yeah, The Boys season 5. That show is still something special. I think it's just so unhinged, and it ticks a lot of boxes and it does a lot of things right. Shout out to Homelander, like what a wicked character that they've come to. That I do feel like that show would just not be the same without that character, and I don't think it's just the character. I always think it's the actor, the way that he puts that character across, and I think it's hilarious. And it's so unhinged, and it's so well written, and I genuinely really like that show. And the other thing, which did get some hate up to now, and just as a world gets a lot of hate still, is Disney's sort of iteration of Star Wars. And a lot of people like to hate on that. However, I'm quite enjoying The Acolyte, which is now, I think we're up to episode, I'm not sure, man, 5, 6? I'm not quite sure. I haven't watched the one for today, obviously, because we are doing this. This is Wednesday. There's another one come out. It did kind of, it was all right for the first couple of episodes. It kind of lost its way, I think, in 3 and 4. And I wasn't quite feeling it. And I was thinking that people were right about the fact that it's done a lot wrong, because there is some utter shite in that series. Like some things you watch and you just be like, what are they doing? But I'm not going to give any spoilers away. There is some stuff that happens and a particular character that I'm like, yes, it is wicked. And I'm so down for it and what they've kind of done. Do you know what I would say to anyone out there? Watch episode 1 just to see Carrie-Anne Moss. I always get them mixed up, which is Trinity from The Matrix, not the other one, as a freaking Jedi.
In a positive way or a negative way?
Oh, it was Trinity was back. Trinity was back for a hot minute. Like she was because it's the same actress and she's doing the Jedi stuff and she's fighting and I was like, oh, please just let her be in this, doing this for the whole series. I'm not going to spoil.
But we will have to subtract some points for the fact that I presume she's not wearing skin tight leather anymore.
She's not wearing skin tight leather, but she still does a hell of a job, and she still looks good doing it. So there we go.
Oh, nice. I will say, Jonesy, I'm not sure if it's the way my algorithm is tuned or not, but I found the things that you're referring to in what I presume was, let's say, episode 5, impossible to avoid as someone who has not watched a single episode of any Star Wars TV show, including The Mandalorian Season 1, not watched anything of anything. But my Twitter feed was all, reveals and moments and fights and arguments about whether those fights were good. One sequence that some people are hailing as sort of like the best lightsaber fight sequence in all of Star Wars, whereas others were picking it apart in a way that felt a little bit pedantic. But I suppose that is Star Wars commentary in this day and age.
I think,
interesting.
You're bang on. It was interesting in that sense because you had half. It seemed, I don't know, like you said, how does the algorithm deal with it? It did feel to me like, as well, like in my Twitter feed, half of the audience was saying this is the best thing ever, and half were saying this is the dumbest thing ever. And I, for one, really liked it. But I will say that some of the things people said were dumb. I agreed, and at the time as I was watching it, I thought it was kind of dumb. It's always hard with these things, like when you've got lore and you've got such a rich heritage to sort of pull from and an expansive canon. I think it is difficult, but I think they're doing a good job with it so far, and I am enjoying it. So yeah, well, I would say worth a shot.
There you go. The Acolyte, 3.4 out of 10 on IMDb, but Jonesy.
Wow,
I knew you were going to like that.
4 out of 10 on that's.
Yeah.
Like I get that some of it. Some of it's a bit dumb, but that's ridiculous. Okay.
I can tell you, because IMDb lets you see these things, that 56.8% of people who have chosen to review The Acolyte on IMDb have given it a 1 out of 10.
If I was going to, this is the thing, if I was going to review it, I would give it maybe like a 6.5, something like that.
Okay.
Like it's a solid show. Maybe even would I give it 7? I would. Do you know what? I wouldn't give it 7 just because there's some elements of it, even down to like technical stuff. Like there's some weird choices for the director where someone's delivered a line and it's not, and it's a bit off, and it just kind of feels weird. And there's a couple of bits with sound design where they just sounds wrong. Like it's like they've recorded it in a studio and it's supposed to be in a big expansive space, but it sounds far too loud and far too like they're in a studio. And I'm like, oh, this is, when it sort of pulls you out of your immersion for that minute or that second,
Yes, 100%.
and then it kind of ruins it a little bit. That's happened a few times with this show. But
Okay.
I think a 3 whatever you said, 3.8 or 3.7. I think that's ridiculous. I think that's very harsh.
I agree that. I mean that's especially given the way that IMDb's ratings and scaling usually works. Obviously, that is not to be taken seriously, and hopefully the sheer volume of 1 out of 10 reviews is indicative of the fact that that's just like that's. Obviously, look, people get unhappy, and sometimes people look for ways to kind of make their unhappiness known or felt. And people are extremely passionate about series like Star Wars, and I do understand that and have a certain degree of respect for it. But it does kind of muddy the waters as someone who is genuinely, for example, like as someone who would potentially be interested in watching high quality Star Wars products. Like there has been a way for me to sort of like, figure out what I shouldn't be watching. Like from what I gather, Andor is quite good, for example. Whereas I probably don't need to watch. What am I going to pick on? I probably don't need to watch the Book of Boba Fett or whatever it was, which was that like.
Yep.
I barely remember that thing existed. It was like one season Mandalorian spin-off.
Did you watch Ashoka?
Sometimes it's just, no, I never. I have. I've never watched a single episode of a single season of any Star Wars. No.
Okay.
It's like I said, even the Mandalorian season 1, not watched a single episode. I haven't. I watched the movies they did, including the spin-off ones. Like I saw the Han Solo movie and I saw Rogue One, and I watched that new trilogy they did, and I was like, I didn't even like Star Wars that much to begin with, and all of these felt fine. Like
I think I'm with you though.
That's the joy of being someone who doesn't care about Star Wars that much, is you can go and watch a movie and be like, I feel like I got my money's worth at the cinema, and I can forget that exists.
I think I'm lucky in that I'm with you. Like I'm not a massive Star Wars guy. Like the original trilogy was fine, but I've always been much more into Star Trek than Star Wars. And
of course.
So I do like Star Wars. Like I think it's got some cool concepts. But I thought the new trilogy, not the newest. So blimey, I thought the prequel trilogy that came out when I was like an older teenager were terrible, and I thought they were really badly made. They were awful. I didn't find much enjoyment in them. Episode 1 I thought was probably the best of the 3, which is saying something. And then when this new latest trilogy came out, I thought that it was much better than the prequel trilogy, and then everyone came out going how awful it was. And I didn't really understand all the ire. It wasn't as good as the original trilogy. Like I don't think any of them are going to be as good as that. But again, I'm just not that much of a Star Wars fan to be that annoyed when they do something kind of crappy that people get really bent out of shape about. So
I'm in the completely same. I'm sure it sounds like we both probably had pretty similar experiences to the kind of in the aftermath of and the sort of the backlash against The Last Jedi, where like, again, I totally understand that some people like really, really care about Star Wars, but as just a dude who like went to go and spend a couple of hours eating popcorn and doesn't really understand the significance of Princess Leia flying through space. I'm like, it was a movie. I didn't love it, but it was like
it was fine.
It was fine.
It was enjoyable. It was fun.
It was totally fine. Yeah. And I agree. Like it was better. I was slightly younger than you, but still feel like I, for the most part, grew up with the prequel trilogy, and I didn't like them. I have younger siblings now, who were at the perfect age to consume the brand new trilogy, but of course. You get your Star Wars is in for a penny, in for a pound. So, I can tell you as someone who rewatched, is it Attack of the Clones? That's episode 2, inside the last
maybe
10 years.
I think it is. Yeah,
I was watching that film with that younger sibling and thinking, this is disastrously bad. This is like disastrously bad. But that's just me.
And then, but I mean, episode 3 I think was even worse. I don't know what that's called. The one where
that's Revenge of the Sith, I think, right?
Where he becomes Darth Vader, And he does that, and you get this. I don't want to have a go at the actor, but the guy who plays Hayden Christensen, who has gotten better. Like apparently, he did a pretty good job as Darth Vader in the TV series that he was in. I think it was Obi-Wan,
right?
One of the more recent ones.
Yeah, he came
But
back.
like episode 3, when he's like doing the whole, if you're not with me, you're against me. And it's like, oh, and then they do the reveal of Darth Vader and they go like, oh, you killed her. And he goes, no. It was so bad. It was, and people nowadays, I work with a lot of younger people, like Gen Z, like early 20s.
I know. And they love it.
Who love it.
Yep.
Unironically love it. And I'm just like, it's trash. And then they try and slam the new trilogy. I'm like, at least it's competent filmmaking, because the prequel trilogy is really awful. Again, not as good as the original trilogy. I think you cannot beat that. I think they're fun. They're really good films. They're fun. They do everything right, and they're of an age, so you can appreciate the age. And the new ones aren't like. The newest trilogy is not great. Like I'm with you. Some of that bullshit about like, why is she flying through space? Why is this going on? Why is that? I'm like, I don't really care. I just want to be here and enjoy the show. But then you get some of those things like Kylo Ren with the mask and the lightsaber with the bits that stick out the side and the cool voice, and he stops the blaster bolt in the air. I'm like, this is good cinema. Like I'm enjoying it's fun.
This. Like if my feeling, like if my intention was to come into the screening of something like that and nitpick it, that like I would just not go. I would save my money. Like I don't know.
I don't know if that's true. I don't think that's necessarily fair. If you're big into a franchise, I guess you feel like you can't. If it's canon, you have to see it. And there'll be things. Some people like that who may get frustrated and annoyed by certain decisions, and those people, like I get it. I understand it. I'm the same with some franchises. They could do things that would really bug me.
No, you're absolutely right. Like if GTA 6 came out and was absolutely terrible, and someone turned around to me and said, "Why didn't you just not play it?" I'd probably punch them. Like,
that's not a choice I can make. Yeah. Exactly. But I think there's kind of a main core of people that aren't those sorts of fans who I agree with you. They could just not have seen it and it would have been fine.
Life's too short, you know. Life's too short.
Yeah.
We say as we record a video game podcast where we regularly slag off things that we don't like and get unnecessarily critical and nitpicky about. But anyway, speaking of getting unnecessarily critical and nitpicky about things that we don't know if we even like or not, I've been playing some of the First Descendant, which is a free-to-play third-person looter shooter that dropped yesterday, I believe, at the time of recording. It's a Nexon Games joint, so this is, again, we've joked about this so many times on the podcast now, but a very flashy, probably quite big budget joint coming out of East Asia, now getting sort of like, now getting its worldwide release. They had a pretty flashy, from what I remember, a CG trailer at, I think, Summer Game Fest. And then, as I alluded to earlier, I think the trailer kind of ended, and then it was like out on July 2nd, and we were all just like, "Oh, that's really soon. Why would you show us an entirely CG trailer as flashy and cool as it is?" Are you watching it now?
No. I'm trying to find like images of it. I'm worried that if I watch it now, it's going to suddenly take over my audio and it's going to go crazy. Oh,
I don't know if even I don't know if you even watch the exact trailer, if it would like move the needle for you that much in terms of remembering it, because a lot of the First Descendant, both in what it looks like and probably the ways I'm going to discuss it, are just analogs of other games.
I do remember it. This is the one that had was it giant bosses, like the massive, epic looking, and it looks a bit Stellar Blade.
It does look a bit Stellar Blade. There's more than a little bit of Stellar Blade in some of the kind of like designs, not necessarily enemy designs, but when you like look at sort of like needle your way through the overall aesthetic. I don't know if it's just because I played Stellar Blade recently, but it was hard not to be reminded of that at times. And there are big bosses. So like one of the ways, fundamentally in terms of the gameplay, it is a pretty cut and dry like third-person shooter that kind of has a crunchiness that reminds me of, weirdly enough, reminds me of Outriders at time, but without the cover system. And likewise, it kind of has that sort of like that ability system. So really, kind of like you're going around like you would in The Division or Anthem or Outriders, You're collecting loads of loot, sort of progressively improving your power level, shooting at dudes, shooting at little dudes whose health bars get melted, and then eventually coming up against big dudes who eat millions and millions of bullets, all in search of better loot and better gear and stuff like that.
Oh, it sounds
But
quite good.
that's the really frustrating about the thing about the First Descendant is there's a lot that I should really hate about it, and I kind of can't bring myself to hate it.
Right.
Like it looks quite pretty. It's an Unreal Engine 5 game that actually like visually is quite strong. It has major performance issues on consoles. I haven't been able to figure that out if they're just innate to the game or if they're server side yet. But I've had much more luck playing on PC.
Right.
Speaking of playing on PS5 and PC, it is cross progression and cross play out of the gate, which is nice. Um, uh, One thing I will say is that sometimes in the presentation, the UI, the UX, and just the way some of the systems worked, I got Warframe vibes.
Right.
And that's not always a positive thing for me. I've always found Warframe, as someone who's only ever tried to play it years after its release, to be a little bit like bloated and impenetrable. And the First Descendant isn't impenetrable, but it's one of those things where like if you start looking through menus or speaking to NPCs before what they do has been tutorialized to you, you will be overwhelmed quickly.
Right.
And I'm looking at everything that's going on and I'm saying, by the time I've gotten through every system and everything's I've been onboarded, I'm gonna have a lot to do and there's gonna be a lot to grind, a lot of resources to collect. And then you remind yourself like the key thing, which is that Anthem, Outriders, Destiny, when I played it at least, The Division, like blah blah blah, blah. What do they all have in common? Like none of them were free to play, and this is, and whilst it's not distracting and like the way it tries to bug you to buy things, at least not in the 5 or so hours that I've played, like as soon as you start to look beyond the kind of the core gameplay and start looking at like what does customization look like in this game, what would it look like if I did want to play as another descendant, and the descendants of the game are kind of like Warframe, so you physically swap from like one character to another and it changes your abilities and your skills, your kind of skill matrix, and but doesn't change your like loadout and the weapons you can use, so it's similar to Warframe in that sense. And that's where it gets a little bit grimy. But at the same time, they've made a like a quite attractive third person looter shooter where just holding left trigger and then holding right trigger after you've started holding left trigger feels good, and like picking up loot and watching numbers go up also kind of feels good. There's some really nice like seamless multiplayer stuff where you kind of explore these open zones. They're not as open as anything as it's hard to find a close analog for it. It's never open world. It's more like these open zones that you fast travel between.
Right.
But when you go in, when you're in them, you can go up to these like mission starting kind of like hubs, and you just hold a button and then the mission starts, and anyone who's doing the mission in your vicinity will automatically be integrated into it with no like loading screens. It's all completely seamless. Sometimes you are teleported to a slightly different location if it wants to match you up with someone who's like 30 seconds or a minute ahead of you in that mission. But so far, the only time I found that system to be weird was one time I was in a place I'd already explored quite thoroughly. I was in a menu doing my loadout, and I started getting like little pitter-patter vibrations. I was like, oh, I'm getting shot. I closed the menu, and there's this like slightly bigger, like elite dude, let's say, in front of me. And I'm like, oh, shoot loads of bullets into him, kill him, and it goes mission complete. And what had happened was I was close enough to a player doing a mission that I had been integrated into the very end of a mission that they'd done all of. So
Right.
I had basically been added into a mission where the only objective left to do was killing the final boss of that mission, who was stood right in front of me.
So then you did it and you got the loot and you did whatever you
Exactly.
finish it off.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now there are like set aside missions where like instanced missions, I guess, where there's an actual loading screen and you choose if you want to do it private or public, and it's like they take like a full on like 20 minutes rather than the ones that take 2 or 3 minutes in the open world. But it's interesting, and it's not fun. It's a little bit janky. The free to play trappings don't feel great. and that's why I feel like I can't give it as blanket a recommendation as like I remember when X Defiant we were talking about that not that long ago, and there's a part of me that's just like, yeah, just try it. What's the worst that could happen? There's a part of me that feels like I have a responsibility to say, be aware with the First Descendant that like you know if you want to link your progress up, you are creating a Nexon Games account, and there are already like elite descendants or whatever they were called, or super descendants that cost like 70-80 pounds if you want to
Right.
buy the bundle that they come in. And I wouldn't be surprised. I've already seen things, for example, where I've done a mission and it's like number of deaths left, like 3. And I'm like, if I use all 3 of those, are you going to block me out of this mission for a certain amount of time? I have already gone to create or research, I should say, a new descendant, having collected all the components for it and spent like the in-game currency for it, and then got a timer. That timer was only 60 seconds, but when do those timers get longer?
Yep.
So that's the asterisk that comes with the First Descendant. This is a free-to-play game made by a massive, massive Korean company.
Right. Okay.
So make of that what you will. But it's also a free-to-play game that like takes massive inspiration from Warframe and The Division, and is just a third-person looter shooter that if you don't like, you can just delete, and if you don't want to spend money on, you can just delete. So I don't know. You know, people are entitled to kind of figure their own way around that minefield.
Interesting. Well, I mean, it is tricky when it gets to that, because obviously it's a balancing act for them as to trying to get the pay for elements and how they integrate those. But yeah, if it does get to a point where it detracts from the game that much, and you feel like you need to delete it, then I think they've missed the mark a little bit. But sounds interesting, looks interesting. I don't know. Maybe we'll have a little. Maybe that'll be the game, Jamie. Maybe that'll be the one that we can get on and play a bit of.
Hey, if you told me you were downloading that game tonight, then I would play with you.
Nice.
Well, no, I would play the First Descendant with you. I don't want anyone to use that. I don't want anyone to make a CD soundboard out of. Yeah, after all the shit you said about Alana Pierce earlier.
I didn't say that much. I just said she was attractive.
You said that you wanted to cast her as the lead role in a game called Resident Evil Dominatrix, and you wanted her to step on your neck and
not mine. Someone else. Someone else's. She can step on someone else.
All I know, Jonesy, is if you keep going down this road, you're at major risk of losing all your sponsors, of the game company that you set up abandoning you, and you might have to take an extended holiday or hiatus and pretend you're feeling burnt out when the reality is much, much darker.
Yeah. Might be worth it for the money.
I made a mistake. You are not Guy Beam. You are actually Alex Jones. I apologize. Yeah. Without beating around the bush, obviously, we weren't here last week, and so we haven't been able to kind of deliver any kind of as it happened or breaking news on the on all the drama surrounding Dr. Disrespect. But I think we felt we'd be remiss if we didn't at least sort of touch on it, because that situation has, well, the dust has begun to settle on it a little bit, even if there are obviously questions that remain to be answered. For anyone that kind of missed any of this, I suppose the big catch up is that former Twitch employees, I don't even know where to start. Basically, former Twitch employees went on. Was it a podcast they were on?
I don't know. I didn't think it was a podcast. I thought it was that they put out, or they were talking online, but I didn't. Maybe it was a podcast. I missed that part of it. I just saw the transcripts of what had been said by some people that was then reshared. Right. I didn't hear them say it themselves.
So one of the main people who is kind of behind the allegations, or what were then at the time allegations, was a former Twitch employee called Cody Connors. And he basically came out on this podcast or whatever it was and claimed that Twitch had originally banned Dr. Disrespect for allegedly, quote unquote, sexting a minor and trying to arrange a meetup at TwitchCon using the platform's Whispers messaging system. In the short term, kind of Dr. Disrespect replied to this in a few different places, replied to a few Twitter accounts, but using what was some quite careful wording, saying things like, "I didn't do anything wrong. All of this has been probed and settled. Nothing illegal. No wrongdoing was found, and I was paid." Seemingly like throwing in the "I was paid" kind of a line there is kind of like a thing of like, so clearly, other people did wrong as well. But people noted, for example, that he didn't just come out and say, "I didn't sext a minor," or "I didn't try to meet up with a minor at TwitchCon." Very careful language. Things got a little bit messier when Midnight Society, who are the development company that he co-founded, that were working on what was to be his and their debut game, cut their ties with him, and the studio's leadership put out a statement that said, "quote unquote, we assumed his innocence and began speaking with parties involved." And then basically, once they began speaking to those parties, they decided that they needed to cut ties. The implication again being that once Midnight Society did their research, that they had seen enough, to put it bluntly. Then there was all kind of things going on. Major outlets like Bloomberg started writing articles, but I don't know if it felt like this way for you, Jonesy, but it felt like the walls were kind of closing in on Dr. Disrespect. And eventually, he did come forward and break his silence and admitted to the incident. Now, I've got some quotes here again because I don't want to kind of misappropriate anything that he said. But while admitting to the incident, he said that there were, quote unquote, no real intentions behind those messages. He claimed that nothing illegal happened. Quote, no pictures were shared, no crimes were committed. I never even met the individual. But obviously, he has come forward. He has shared his side of the story, as he put it. But since sharing that side of the story, he has gone on an extended vacation, which kind of makes it sound like maybe it was by choice. He did at the time try and blame it on burnout. But it does seem like the two would appear to be connected, to say the least. Jonesy, I mean, we had a whole podcast like title and thumbnail back in the day, you, me, and Chris, speculating about what could have happened when this story first broke in 2020. What was it like kind of following all of these pieces of information, all of this news as it broke for you?
It was an interesting one because I think at the time, a lot of people, I think us included, had speculated that this was the sort of thing that had happened. Right. I think we even talked about the fact as to why would Twitch be kind of cagey in the whole thing, and why they didn't say anything, why he didn't say anything. And I think we even speculated at the time that it was maybe that it wasn't anything explicit, but maybe it was something that meant that they had to part ways. Right. What made this a little bit more interesting when everything came out in the last couple of weeks was, I think, just before everything came out and he was getting, grilled for it. And it's difficult to know obviously who the people who are actually releasing information is. There was a post on, I'm not sure if it was 4chan or Reddit, I can't remember, but someone came out and basically said that they were an ex-Twitch employee. As well as the ex-Twitch employee who came out and revealed what had happened. Because as I understand it, the person that came out and if it was the podcast or whatever, they kind of broke silence, which meant that Dr. Disrespect then was like, well, now I can say whatever I want to defend myself.
That he felt like he was no longer legally bound from discussing the matter after their version of events had been made public.
Yeah, exactly. But then someone else had come out and said that they were also at Twitch at the time, and this is the I don't know. I don't believe half of what this person said, just because it sounds too, it sounds too A, conspiratorial, and B, useful to Disrespect in some respects. They effectively said that this was all a little bit of a stitch, or it was partially, sorry, not all, but partially a stitch up from the Twitch side, and that a bunch of the Twitch employees were trying to find anything they could to get rid of Dr. Disrespect back then because they wanted to get rid of him. And this is why they were going through whisper chats and trying to find something, which was this. I'm saying this is a post that was put onto 4chan, was by someone who said they were on the inside.
Right. Okay.
But you
did it elaborate on why they wanted to get rid of one of the highest earners for the platform?
They said that it was since he'd done the bathroom incident that they had a really bad taste in their mouth about him and were doing anything they could, or were trying to. They basically said it was a matter of time until they found the thing, and that they weren't like top Twitch people. They were like maybe middling or lower down Twitch people that wanted to get rid of him. So probably didn't care about how big he was, but just didn't like him and were trying to get rid of him. Anyway, that's all by the by because we don't know how much of that is true. But that's one of the first things I saw about the story when it came out, was that person saying that. And since then, there have been a bunch of other conspiracies, down to the point of saying that the actual 17-year-old girl wasn't real. She was made up, and it was all this sort of thing. I think we can say that was all bullshit at this point. It is weird. Like his whole thing of I did nothing illegal was done, no pictures was shared. I hadn't even met up with this person, because you then get back to the point of, well, hold on though. So what are you saying? You were sending and he says I was sending inappropriate messages to a minor. Like you're in your 30s. You know someone is like 17. You're messaging.
You're
them.
married. You have a kid.
I don't think the married and kid thing matters insofar as.
I mean,
no, it matters in moral terms, but I think when but when you're talking about someone who's that age, like probably not that much younger than I am, you just don't accidentally message a minor inappropriate stuff. Like,
no.
you know absolutely that there is not even like a dalliance of, oh, I'm just going to say X, Y, Z. Like you just wouldn't. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Agreed. Like one of the most damning things I heard someone point out online, which was that, quote, to say, hey, yes, I did send those inappropriate messages to a minor, but I wasn't going to do anything, is what every single person ever caught on every single episode of To Catch a Predator ever has said.
I will say the fact that the only possible way, if he came out and said it, that I would be like, okay, fair enough. Not fair enough, but I kind of get that, is if he basically said, this person was a digital persona to me, and I had no, I didn't associate them with their age in any way, and it was only after the fact that I actually realized, like I knew how old they were, I didn't realize how old they were. Do you know what I mean? I could then say, if the messages were not that inappropriate at all, but they skirted us, because I think he said the messages weren't that inappropriate, but they
were casual, mutual conversations that sometimes leaned too much in the direction of being inappropriate.
So if there was like a flirty joke, and that's just how he talks, but if you read it back after, but I don't think that's what it was. I think it was like,
no, I agree.
I think it was like thirst messaging some girl online, and yeah, I would say, I said before the podcast, the thing that makes this sort of a bit weird in the UK is, if he lived in the UK and this girl was from the UK, you could meet up with her and bone the crap out of her. Like, she's 17, it's legal at 16 in the UK.
Please don't say things like bone the crap out of her.
Having said that, even though it's legal in this country, if you met up at his age with a 16-year-old or a 17-year-old and slept with them, everyone would look at you like you were some sort of weirdo.
Yes, absolutely.
And that is what I think this comes down to.
That's how it's hard not to look at him that way. And like, it's hard 100%. Not to look at the decision that his sponsors have made, the decision that the studio made, the decision that like streamers that were considered friends of his have all made. You know, you had the likes of Tim the Tatman, for example, having to come out and kind of film videos where they've distanced themselves from him and said that they can't, stand by him following this behavior. Like,
it makes it work. I'm almost like, if you were him and it was really not that bad, let's say it all came from the other direction and she was trying to crack onto him and he sent a couple of messages that were really not that bad. If you were him, you would just put the messages out if that was the reality. Right. But he hasn't, probably because he would look really bad. So
yeah, not only that, but like, we're at the point now where even in the big reveal statement that he released, which I'll remind people, the third paragraph of which starts with, "Let's cut the fucking bullshit, as you know there's no filter with me." That the very statement that included that wording was edited multiple times.
Yes.
As he edited the word minor out of the statement, then edited the word minor back into the statement.
Yeah.
So there's none of it that was cut in the bullshit. There absolutely was a filter, and this absolutely is a guy who, while being the only person talking, because Twitch aren't sitting like putting out statements saying, yes, not to disrespect message minors. Twitch haven't said or done anything. He's the only person that's talking, and he's still struggling to keep a lid on it.
Yes. Well, but also the thing of, there's no filter in me. It's like, what do you mean? You're 100% filter. The filter is Dr. Disrespect. You are Guy Beam. You have a 100% filter, which is a character you've created that you present in a certain way. It's all filter.
Yeah. And you've spent the last 4 years telling everyone you have no idea why you got banned, or you can't, or trying to create some weird, like, illusionary circumstances around it. The whole thing is bullshit, and the whole thing has been a filter. I do have to ask you, whilst it sounds like we're completely agreed on Dr. Disrespect's role in all of this, and the likelihood of sort of the realities behind some of the messaging, the intent, and so on and so forth. Some people are looking at Twitch. Obviously, there's clearly like some legal elements here because we know, because of things that Dr. Disrespect has said in the past, that settlements have been involved, payments have been involved. Clearly, there's like NDAs and all kinds of things, but people are now looking at Twitch and saying, okay, we can understand why maybe you're not saying anything or putting a statement out. Maybe your hands are tied legally, but like, was this really the right way to handle someone who was sending inappropriate messages to a minor? Was letting him like go off and like be active on other platforms and make as much money as he made on YouTube, for example, a wise decision? Like, you could have, if this is what should have happened to Dr. Disrespect's career, Twitch could have made this happen 4 years ago.
No, I don't think I agree with that, purely because this is why it comes. This is where it gets interesting with regard to that the person who or whatever put that 4chan thing out, whatever it was, because one of the things they said, and I don't know how I let's assume that what they said was accurate. They basically said at the time, the comments that he'd made were, as he'd said, weren't illegal, didn't cross a legal threshold, but they did cross a taste threshold, if you like. So actually, they couldn't have actually done anything legally to do whatever. So actually, and because it was all private, there's nothing they could do legally. So actually, by separating from him, they had to pay him off, because to get out of that contract, they had to say that, because effectively they were breaching their contract because he'd done nothing illegal, he'd done nothing which would be a violation of the terms of the contract. So they had to say, here's some money, please leave, basically. Which then gets to the point of like, if they'd have then so you got to imagine there's NDAs and everything tied to that whole deal, and if they'd have said anything, if they'd have come out and said anything, they would have breached that and they would have had to pay even more. Like, at the end of the day, I think it makes it really difficult, and I get why people would say, well, that's kind of immoral, but the problem you have is, as a company, are you really going to throw yourselves under the bus financially and break a whole bunch of rules that you've got? In a weird way, maybe the best thing they possibly could have done is not separate cut ties with him, not cancel the contract, and they could have just said, we're a bit upset or ashamed a little bit because one of our big streamers, Dr. Disrespect, has been inappropriately messaging a minor on our platform, and then not done anything else, not cancelled, not got rid of him, not cancelled the contract, not paid him off, and then let his popularity wane naturally.
Right, like put it out there into the ether and let nature take its course.
Yeah, I think for me that maybe is the only course of action they could have taken. But then maybe he has some recourse whereby he says, well, look, you poisoned the well and you ruined it, so I couldn't make any money, so now I can sue you. And I don't know. I don't know enough legally about how that would work. Neither. But it is really hard. But then that comes down to so many things. Like, you've always got to have a line, and maybe he was just on one side of a line that meant that they couldn't say / do anything. We'll never know until we actually see anything.
No, that's
which we never will.
Yeah, no, and we never will. And like, I don't know that we need to necessarily. Like, I think some people,
Agreed.
Like, I think some people are kind of going out there and trying to take the stance like hashtag release the whispers or whatever. But I think the more you go in that territory, the more you look like you are kind of sympathizing with or trying to protect someone who still did something that we can all agree that was morally, I don't even know how to say, like, morally dubious, but also just like on a broader level, like something creepy and something that I don't really have any qualms saying was wrong.
Maybe I'm naive. I'm not rich and powerful and successful. I've never had 17-year-old girls throw themselves at me.
Not yet. Not until you launch a crazy taxi mechanical game.
Maybe. But I genuinely do not understand, like, how you fall foul of that. Because if you 17-year-olds are, you can't tell me 23-year-olds aren't.
Bro, like,
in which case, message the 23-year-old.
Not only are you totally right, But even 18-year-olds, like it's still
Knock it up
weird.
a year.
The age difference is still too big, in my opinion, and 18-year-olds are still too young that they shouldn't be putting themselves in positions like that. But at least you're not going to get into any trouble. And the other thing is, like,
It should be
it could
that
be more.
easy.
It could be morally fucked up and morally bankrupt, and it could like ruin the family dynamic. But even if you want to get divorced, leave your kid with your wife, and trade it all in for a newer model, like you can do that, and your fan
Yeah.
and most of your fan base will be completely fine with it. There are so many ways around for 6'7" attractive millionaire video game players to get other like to
But no, this is worse. He's not, because he said there was no pictures traded. I'd never met the person. So what he's actually saying is he could have got his kicks from a chatbot that said she was 18 and never had this problem.
yeah. He
Doesn't
he
make any
probably
sense.
probably the same thoughts that run through his head when it hits the pillow at night. One thing that is slightly curious, although he probably regrets it with hindsight, is that obviously, like I said, sponsors gone, game studio gone, friends and co-streamers gone, platforms gone.
That's mate.
But
That's so. I I know. Like, I don't want to say I feel sorry for him, but in some respects,
you reap what you sow.
there is a universe where it was like where maybe he should maybe it was that that far, you know, it was nowhere near the line, and actually there is a world where if we knew what was in it, then he should in the future be able to apologize and come back, just because of the scale. But at the same time, I'm like, I don't believe it.
You said it yourself.
I'm not that. He's a millionaire, like you said.
If the messages themselves, if the receipts themselves would have better served him than him admitting to sending borderline and inappropriate messages to a minor, then he would have acknowledged what the messages were.
Yeah, I think so.
Like everything he has done in this process has been to protect himself, even in the process of admitting it. What I was going to ask though was, in spite of all of that, he still ended it on this note, quote unquote, "They want me to disappear." Yeah, fucking right. So my question to you, Mr. Jones, is: does Dr. Disrespect ever come back?
Yeah, I think he does.
Or do companies start getting mysterious CVs and resumes to the door from someone called Guy Beam, who worked in game development 10 years ago?
No, I think he's as far as I assume, he's got plenty of money and plenty of resources and stuff. And there's enough people that wouldn't care about this,
right?
Who would be on his side, even if it was much worse, would be on his side. Let's be honest. And so I think he could come back, and I think he could make something happen. It's obviously going to be much more difficult, the fact that he can't be platformed on a lot of platforms.
But there are probably still some. Like, all it takes is a website like Kick to say, yes, Dr. Disrespect will still earn 100% of his subscription revenue, and he probably has a career again.
That's exactly what I think will happen. There will be a platform that say, no, there was nothing, and this is the weird thing. Like, I suppose if you really pushed me, I kind of don't. I don't think they're almost like the idea of going, they didn't do anything illegal, but it's not great, therefore they can never work again. I don't like that, but I only don't like it because I don't know what was said. I'm sure if I actually knew what was said, I'd probably be fine with it. But it's almost like the thing of, I think free speech should be paramount. It really worries me when you can't say whatever you want to say, but at the same time, some people say some things that I think are really fucking terrible. So it's difficult. It's difficult.
It certainly is. It certainly is.
Talking about free speech, we've got one of our lovely patrons, Rodrigo, has exercised his right for free speech, and he's donated $10 to us in a super chat on YouTube, and he said, "Here's some change for my favorite game news duo. Always fun watching you two." Thank you very much, Rodrigo. It is very much appreciated. Thank you for joining us on the live and chatting with us at the same time.
Absolutely, very great to have you with us. One last thing before we go, Jonesy. People looking at Dr. Disrespect's final stream and his final moments of that final stream would have noticed something else going on as he was talking about burnout and how he felt like he needed to take an extended vacation. One thing that probably wouldn't have helped was the fact that at the time he was, of course, streaming Elden Ring's latest DLC, Shadow of the Erdtree, which has, since we've last podcast, launched and gone on to be a massive success. It has sold at least 5 million copies worldwide. The last time we got an update, it quickly raced up to a 95 score on Metacritic, which is the highest scoring piece of DLC ever on that website. But something that Dr. Disrespect may well have been grappling with himself at the time, it has spawned a wave of conversations across social media. Not all of them necessarily positive. There was a lot of chatter, a lot of discourse, if you will, about the game's difficulty. Some very high-profile content creators and streamers actually quit the game, or at least temporarily put the game down out of frustration. There was a weird moment where, amidst some conversations about not just the difficulty, but also how well the game performed, technically speaking, on PC, where the game even dropped to mixed reviews on Steam, which was, almost unprecedented in the certainly in the run up to release. I mean, first of all, as you are now a returning Elden Ring player, to what extent do you have an eye on Shadow of the Erdtree for, I'm going to say, 80 hours of in-game time, probably at the rate that you're going from now, when you can finally access it? And two, what did you have any thoughts on the weird difficulty discourse that seems to pop up every time From Software release a game?
I did watch some of the some boss fights from Shadow of the Erdtree, and some of them did look. Some of the builds that people had, and then they were just getting absolutely owned, did look kind of crazy. And the fact that you can have a game which, so some people have spent so much time in and got such high level in, and then just to get demolished. But then at the same time, I'm like, I knew that getting into a FromSoft game, and I'm not even a big FromSoft player. Like, that's part of the whole allure, I thought, was get good and was level up and was, figure out how this works.
Kind of the point, right?
And kind of the point, and if your build doesn't work, maybe you have to go and change it. What was weird is I also then saw some people who were like the polar opposite to this, which was like, I saw some weird ones, and they must be like, watch my hyperactive kid who doesn't like holding a controller dance mat their way to winning, to completing Shadow of the Erdtree and taking on the hardest boss. And I'm like, well, hold on. If you can have people that are saying that this game is unplayable because it's so hard, and you've got some people saying, yeah, it's really hard, but I did it with a controller that you have to chew. Like,
you see the girl that did it with her mind, supposedly.
Oh, yes. And then people saying it was bullshit and she had another screen and that people were playing. Yeah. And the weird thing with it, I think, that with these games as well is, because there's always that thing of there's no easy difficulty, there's no whatever. But as we were saying earlier, you can go and grind and get higher leveled, and therefore it's relatively easier. So it's almost like there's almost like a natural thing built into FromSoft games like this, where you can make it easier for yourself if you're finding it too difficult. So you can do it. It's just how much time do you want to spend getting to a place where you are capable of doing it, I suppose.
Agreed.
But isn't that the point?
Yeah, I kind of felt like it was. I think. Do you know what it was? You kind of talked about it a little bit when you talked about the different builds and high level characters being taken into the DLC. I think some people were caught off guard. Elden Ring is a game that some people have got so outrageously familiar with over recent years, and they know it inside out, that all of a sudden I think FromSoft, and from what I gather, I'm not familiar, but from what I gather, this is something they kind of always do with their DLC. They needed to think of ways to kind of like shake things up again. Like they didn't want a DLC where people took high level characters and broken builds straight in and just walked through every boss, because they knew that if that was fun, then they'd have made an easier game to begin with. So that was never the point. And the fact that they circumvented that makes perfect sense to me. The fact that caught some people off guard, it surprised me. There were some intricacies that get lost on me. When people get into like complaining about the design of some of the bosses and like their move sets and how like frequently they can stagger you, or like how big your windows are for attacking, that's where I'm like, I admit I'm not an expert, and maybe there are some bad bosses in Shadow of the Erdtree for all
I'm
I
sure
know.
there are, yeah.
But one thing that seems to be unanimous about this game is that the people who do kind of do what we both feel like you're kind of meant to do or something like this, which is like find a way to get through it, all seem to have glowing things to say once they've done so. Right. It's the people who gave up who seem to be annoyed. So I don't know.
But isn't there part of it? Do you wonder maybe that there's part of it whereby they said, we want people to go into this DLC feeling almost like they've started the game again. And it doesn't matter if your character's super high level. It doesn't matter if you think you've got the perfect build.
Yeah.
You're going to walk into this, face a boss, and go, "Oh my goodness!" And it made me think of, this is a bit of an aside, Mr. Pink's from Reservoir Dogs take on what the song "Like a Virgin" is supposed to actually represent, and it's not that she is
having
a virgin.
sex with a black guy.
It's that she's It's that she has sex, and it's so amazing that she thinks it's like the very first time again. So in some respects, maybe they're saying this is going to feel like your first time again.
Right. How have I misremembered Reservoir Dogs?
I'm pretty sure there's nothing about, hey, it's just going to
I thought that it was like that Madonna's having sex with a black guy, and because his penis was so big, it's like it's
maybe I'm disremembering.
Makes her feel like a virgin.
I thought it was just that it was so.
First time.
I thought it was similar. I thought it was so big. I don't remember it being specifically about a black guy. But
do you know what?
Maybe.
If we take race out of it, I apologize. That's on me. Then I think it's actually an interesting observation that maybe Miyazaki does have some like a virgin-esque ambitions when it comes to.
I think that's what it is.
Yeah.
I think he's saying no.
And it makes sense.
Yeah, you think you're going to waltz into this all comfortable and demolish all these bosses because, hey, you've been, you've spent this long in it. But no, we're going to do something you weren't expecting. And because they're so highly leveled up, some of them, they're like, maybe that's why some of the bosses, they've gone, we're going to switch this the hell on up. You're not even going to expect this. You're not going to expect this, the level of like, how they can stagger you, like you were saying, and what they can do. There was one boss that I saw that looked absolutely amazing. Which was a on fire dude that had a flaming cauldron for a torso.
Oh yeah,
that looked absolutely incredible, and it was a high level player.
The really big ones,
absolutely huge guy. And
I think there are multiple of them. I think they just walk around.
Oh, okay, and it was this guy. This enemy picked the player up and like put him in the top of him and let him roll around and just cook. And I was like, that is horrible, but it looks incredible.
Yeah,
and I kind of want to play.
There's a great moment. There's a great moment in From Software bosses, especially when when it's a part of a moveset that you don't get to until slightly later on in that battle. Where the moment they do a move where you go, I didn't know that they could do that, and it kills you instantly.
Yeah.
And it sounds like it's cheap, but in the moment you're like, no, fair enough. That's something I've learned. That's a piece of information I have now, and I take that with me on to the next one. That's the loop.
That's the loop.
Well, unfortunately, neither Jonesy nor myself have played Shadow of the Erdtree, so we can't offer any first-hand hot takes on it. But needless to say, it does appear to be doing very well, having set the internet on fire for reasons both good and bad in recent weeks. And with that, though, Jonesy, that about wraps up our smorgasbord of bite-sized pieces of video gaming news from the past, let's say, week and a half. Let's be generous.
It does. I just want to give, because he's dropping comment after comment, so I just want to give a shout out to 69DJ who said, I can't believe this is still live. It's been hours.
We need the 69DJ. I can't believe it.
It's been a while. I do have to correct you though, because the whole of Reservoir Dogs does not take place in one room. It happens in like 3 rooms, because it's the diner, then it's the place they go to after the burglary. You've got the shot on the street, and there's also the shots of when
there's Tim Roth in the back of the car bleeding out.
Yeah, and then Tim Roth also when he's talking to the guy on the street when he's practicing, basically.
Well, because all the
5 or 6 places.
All the flashbacks of him, Tim. Are we spoiling Reservoir Dogs now? But like, all the flashbacks are like of Tim Roth revealing like how he came to be there. Right, that's all. Most of that's outside. I remember they were on a rooftop at one point. Yes, Reservoir. I will acknowledge no actual penises or fucking happens in Reservoir Dogs. If anything, that's something that film is sorely lacking. You know, like if I could do like a little I don't know, maybe a sequel, Reservoir Dogs.
That's
2.
all it is. Is that them?
It's just Harvey Keitel getting fucked up the arse by Tim Roth wearing a big black strap on, going, it feels like getting fucked up my ass for the first time.
It'd have to be.
That doesn't sound anything like Harvey Keitel, but have to be a pre. Because they're dead. Of course, more Reservoir Dogs spoilers. This feels like a podcast that we should probably end. Thoughts?
I agree. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Thank you all so much for coming and hanging out with us over the last couple of hours and listening to us rambling about all things video games and uh, penises, I guess, by the end there. We hope you had a jolly good time. Jonesy, thank you very much for joining me on this adventure.
Thank you, mate.
How have you enjoyed yourself?
Yeah, I've enjoyed it. I was very tired coming in, and I feel like you've kept me going and given me the energy to get to the end. So I
Hey.
appreciate it.
That's what we like to hear. The world needs to know that Jonesy had 3 hours sleep the other day, and so he's been running on fumes the whole time. So everyone leave lovely comments either in the comment section down below, if you're still watching live on YouTube. Everyone leave nice, encouraging, and thankful words for Mr. Jones. And I say at the same time, thank you to you for watching and/or listening. And hopefully, unless there are any other disasters in either Jonesy's or mine's personal lives, we will see you next week. Probably on Tuesday, but who knows? We like to keep you on your toes. Bye.
Absolutely. See ya.